Welcome, everybody, to this seminar. Happy there are so many people here today and this morning. And I have the pleasure, a great pleasure, to start this seminar where we are talking about homelessness and how we can combat homelessness. My name is Bent Madsen. I come from Denmark. Maybe some of you can hear it. If you come from Scandinavian countries, surely you can. But I do my best speaking bad English. We are very good at it. And I'm the CEO in Denmark for the Federation of the Danish Housing Associations, and I'm also the president of Housing Europe. The whole 2 or 3 hours here, we have to talk about homelessness. How many come to this and attend this festival? We have more than 27 different nations at the festival. And we have people from Kenya, we have people from Hawaii attending this festival. So there can be a very, very broad exchange of experience and knowledge between us. And that's exactly why we are here. Housing Europe and FEANTSA and Abbé Pierre has created the Housing Solution Platform. And the Housing Solution Platform is to exchange knowledge about how we can combat homelessness. When we are looking at the housing associations, no matter it's affordable housing, or municipal housing, every form of housing, it's housing for welfare. I think it's a key thing. So what we are doing when we provide housing, when we have housing associations and we provide social housing, municipal housing, affordable housing, what we are doing is to have a focus on the link between housing and social intervention. That's why we are here, to make the welfare state function better. And when we look at housing previously homeless people, what we are trying to solve here is that we can provide the homes, and we should provide affordable homes so people with low income can afford to live there and pay the rents. But it's not enough. We also have to have the right social interventions. We can succeed with the social interventions, but if we do not succeed in the supply of homes, we do not succeed at all. And when we succeed at having the homes at low rents, but we do not have the proper social interventions, we will fail too. So this is very crucial, what we are talking about today, and it's a key to solve the problems with homelessness, and it's also a key when we look in other areas, when we have the most vulnerable people have foothold on the labor market, or whatever we do, we have to have this combination between a safe and secure home and the social interventions. This festival, when you look at one of the words describing this festival, it is we have the right to housing and get rid of the excuses not to guarantee it. I think it's a very good takeaway when we start the housing festival and think about it during the housing festival and when we come home after the housing festival. We have to forget all the excuses and have to get action actually to do it. We represent many welfare states and welfare societies here, and nevertheless, in nearly all of our countries, or maybe all of our countries, there are homelessness. And there shouldn't be. Actually, there shouldn't be. Fortunately, we are here in Finland, and when we look in Finland and the Y Foundation, we can see very good example when we look at the figures in Finland. High rates of homelessness many years ago, and now it's very, very low. So we can see from the example in Finland that we can succeed if we are doing the right thing. So the key here is housing and social services and how these things can work together. When we look at the European level, there is an action European platform for combating homelessness was introduced last year. And what we try in Housing Europe is to come with the best examples and to then we have a platform to exchange the best examples so that we are not, when we're making policy to combat homelessness, it's not one of those endless abbreviations in the European context. We know them all when we are talking about policy, but we have actually to put some content in it to get the figures down and at last get rid of homelessness. We will hear many good examples today, and we will start with our keynote speaker. We had a little talk before how to make the introduction of the keynote speaker. And it's the minister from Ireland. That's correct. And Dara O'Brien, and he said, when you introduce me, you have to use words like, what was it? Dynamic it was, yes. And innovative, yes. And then the rest, yes, okay, then I just can. But it is, in fact, a right thing to say. Really dynamic. You have really moved on this agenda and really moved on the agenda of social housing. And when we last time at the informal minister meeting in March in Nice, I said to you, and I was very impressed, that how much you have done in such a short time to provide affordable housing in the Irish context. And I know what you will tell us about now is also very targeted to combat homelessness. So we are so very pleased to have you here today, Dara, and please take the floor. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Benton. It's a real pleasure to be here in Helsinki, and it's great to be meeting people in person now right across Europe. We spent a couple of years, working with each other via Zoom and Teams meetings and that, and it is really important that we get to meet in person to be able to share our own ideas, our own issues. And if I could just really firstly commend Housing Europe for the approach that you have taken to ensure that collaboration exists in not just on a policy basis, but on implementation too. And it is certainly the work that you have done has helped to frame the policy initiatives that I've brought forward in our government's plan Housing for All. I'm delighted to be joined by colleagues Michelle Norris, I see there, who's on our Housing Commission. And we've established a commission on housing in Ireland for the first time as well to look at the longer term effects, transgovernmental, and I might touch on that. I have a script, but I think I will we just think we'll move past that for the moment. But it's a real pleasure to be here. And I want to try to give you a flavour for what the Irish approach is to tackling homelessness, particularly in the area of housing first, and where we have had some real successes. If I could just say at the outset, though, from meeting colleagues across Europe and the French Minister Vargon and Commissioner Schmidt, who've been really, really important in this space as well, to be actually bringing the politicians and legislators together as well, who are supported by our NGOs, to see what we can do on a pan-European basis, because every European country is grappling with housing issues, be they issues on affordability, homelessness, provision of social housing, all of them, all to various degrees. And I think it's quite telling that we're here in Finland, a country that has made such progress in relation to tackling homelessness. And we do have an issue in Ireland that we are grappling with, and that's been due to effectively 12 years of undersupply of social and affordable homes. So the important piece for us as a government was to ensure that we put together a robust housing plan called Housing for All. But the plan is only as good as the objectives within it and the action points within it. Over 218 very specific actions that are understood in plain English and in plain Irish as well, where people can understand what we're actually doing. But most importantly is to get agreement from government partners to fund the plan. So for the first time in Ireland, we have a plan on a multi-annual basis that's fully funded to the tune of €4 billion of exchequer funds each year between now and 2030. And for me as Housing Minister, that's crucially important because it means I have the capital in my base. Now that €4 billion a year unlocks a further 8 billion in private investment that we also need. Because some of the discussions that happen in Ireland and right across Europe is we need all tenures of housing. And right across the board, from social, affordable, cost rental, which we've started in our country and looked very closely at European models of cost rental, which didn't exist in Ireland 12 months ago. And now we've hundreds of tenants in place in cost rental homes. And that has been by clearly looking at our friends in Europe, our EU colleagues, and seeing what is being done there. But with those forms of tenure, we also need private homes, but it's about building up supply. So what do we intend to do is to deliver 300,000 new homes between now and 2030, 90,000 social homes, 56,000 affordable homes, and the remainder being private. This year we're targeting 9,000 new build social homes. And should we attain that, which I intend that we will, that'll be the single biggest amount of social homes delivered, new social homes in any year in the history of our state. And the Republic being independent for just 100 years this year. Because the intervention that we're making, and I want to agree with Bent on this, is that the state must lead by example. And this is the single biggest intervention that the state has made in housing. And that means that we have to change how people think about things. We have to build capacity within the construction sector, within our local authorities, within our housing associations, to deliver these very exacting targets. So some will say that if we need 40,000 homes in 1 year, that we can just deliver them. You can't. You need to be able to build up the base, build up the capacity, and build the skills in our workforce to be able to do that. And that is something that we're focused very much on, is the whole apprenticeships model, is getting our young women and young men interested in trades again. If you look at the demographics of our construction sector in most parts of Europe, there's a big gap. There's a gap of 10 years and the demographics are older. And we've got to see, well, how can we fill that skills gap? And that is really, really important that we do that. And we have had support from Europe and from the Commission. And delighted Katarina's here from the Commission as well. Just if I could turn to a couple of things. Obviously, as we're dealing with the issues in relation to housing, we're also helping our friends from Ukraine who are fleeing a brutal war that has been vested upon them, a reprehensible invasion. And the European Union, I believe, has rightly so acted in union in making sure that all our friends from Ukraine, those who are fleeing oppression, have safe harbour in each of our countries. And as Housing Minister as well, I am also responsible for our medium-term response to make sure that our friends from Ukraine have a safe and secure place to live and indeed to work, to raise their family so their kids can go to school, and that we can help them deal with the trauma of what they are dealing with. So far, we have about 35,000, between 35,000 and 38,000 Ukrainians in our country. Another 1,000 coming through every week. So quite similar here to Finland, the same type of numbers coming through. But I firmly believe that it is the right and proper thing for us to do. It does give us additional challenges, and it also ensures that we have to deliver on our own housing targets, that we're there already, and we need additionality on top of it. I'd just like to turn to Housing First, if I may. In my view, that we have right now about 10,000 homeless people in our country, and that figure over the last number of months has increased. And I particularly see those who have been long-term homeless requiring the health supports and the social care supports around it. It's not just providing keys for a house or for an apartment, it's actually providing the wraparound support. So we have very aggressively and in a positive way have taken on board the Housing First model. And we have over 700 tenants, most of whom have been long-term homeless, with mental health, addiction, other health issues as well. And we've managed to maintain a tenancy retention rate of over 90% within that first cohort of 700. We're further expanding that Housing First model right across the Republic of Ireland by establishing a national office. And we're targeting another at least 1,400 tenancies. So whilst we have seen an increase in recent months in homelessness, we've continued to see a regular decrease in our rough sleepers. And we're very much targeting those who need the support now. As we build our capacity up and build our housing stock up, we will then see those homeless numbers reduce, I hope, towards the third quarter of this year as we build our supply up. We have had, like some of our European countries as well, issues through COVID, where we had 2 very significant construction shutdowns, which did not help in delivery in 2020 and 2021, where we delivered around 20,000 houses in each of those years, excuse me. But this year we will deliver about 25,000 new homes this year, and then next year that'll be 29,000, and we build our capacity up to an average of 33,000. That's where we need to be to have a stable and secure housing market within our system, half of which will be supported by the state. So the social homes are for those who are on a social housing list, are low-income families. Our next cohort is cost rental, and cost rental has been received very positively in Ireland, run through our housing association, so supported by government, supported by the EIB as well, I might add, to be able to provide rents that just cover the cost and development of those particular developments for 40-year long-term secure tenures. And that is something that is very attractive to people. The Irish do have, we have it in our nature that we like to own things, and home ownership is really important, and particularly important in our cities where we want to get people living back in our cities. And that's why on top of cost rental, we're focusing very strongly on the delivery of affordable housing, where the state takes the equity between the finance that you have and the finance that you need. And that will be available to all first-time buyers, and will also help release rental properties back out into the market. So actually on the 1st of July, just in 2 weeks' time, we're launching our first home shared equity scheme, which will be open to all first-time buyers to be able to buy new homes, where we will take up to 30% of the equity in that home. It's not a second mortgage, it's an equity. There's a servicing charge on it, and you can buy that out or not over the course of the term, or when you sell the property, that is paid back. And we have had, I have to say, great assistance from the Commission in that space, from the EU Commission, and working through the model that we're bringing forward. And I think that will be a game changer for people within Ireland. Our further piece is then to tackle the scourge of vacancy. And vacancy of properties, of stock that we have already, feeds into our homeless crisis as well, because we have buildings that are there. We have homes right across Europe, in many of our major cities, in Brussels and right the way through, where we have vacant properties that should be put to use. And when we look at our climate action targets as well, not only we should be doing that from a climate perspective, but morally we should be doing that too. So we are bringing forward our own scheme called Croí Cónaithe, which is Irish for Living Hearts, Living City, where we will bridge that gap of viability to ensure that we get dormant permissions back into use, where we will partner with the private sector to build apartments for sale. And we will also bring a scheme in to help people to buy vacant homes and to basically renovate those vacant homes for them to be in. And very importantly, a lot of those vacant homes we're going to bring into public housing stock through repair and lease schemes that have worked really well. So to be able to do that, we've also, as planning minister, I've relaxed the planning in that side, where we've given planning exemptions for conversion of commercial properties into residential properties where no planning permission is required. The local authority will oversee the work. And we are thankfully seeing hundreds of buildings right across our country coming back into use, many of which are being used for housing first, and used in a really successful way, very positive within the community, where they're seeing derelict buildings back to use, where they're seeing people who need housing get it, who need the support, get that support, and people are being welcomed within their community. So one could think about this potentially as a community planning gain, whilst also providing more social homes. Just when I was doing a small bit of research for this morning, and I was looking up some Finnish proverbs, which I don't often do, I have to say, to my Finnish friends, but there was one that really struck me. And when we're tackling as the scale of the issue that is homelessness and housing right across Europe, it's how do we do that? And the Finnish proverb that says a tree is climbed from its base is very prescient. Like, that is exactly where it is. Like, we have the capacity within the European Union, within my own country, all of us, to be able to tackle this crisis. It is well within our means, within our financial means, but within our expertise. We have the knowledge, the know-how, We do have the people with dynamism and innovation, I'm not talking about myself, who can deliver this. The way to do that, in my view, and I would like to see greater European cooperation on some of the practical measures, is through the platform and through EPOC. I think is a real opportunity for us to pick specific items that we can say, whilst housing is not a competency of the European Union, that we can look on a pilot basis in each of the countries, that why not take housing first? That if you look at in Ireland, that the EU provide assistance for an expansion, and in countries where housing first does not exist, that we can set up pilot programs supported by the European Union. And I've discussed this in detail with Commissioner Schmidt and with Yves Leterme as well. And, you know, there are very positive soundings coming back. And policy platforms such as this are really important, looking at housing solutions and what Housing Europe are doing and FEANTSA are doing right across Europe. But I would like us to take, as a European Union, as legislators, as governments within the European Union, to take a decision that we will focus on homelessness within the Commission and focus on what we can do together in a very tangible way, to have an EU programme to tackle homelessness in real terms. And that means be it repurposing and refurbishing vacant stock across Europe, or be that an expansion of housing first across Europe. And that in particular is what I would like to see, because we have the infrastructure in place, because of the partnership between our housing associations, our health authorities, our governments and the European Union. We have the structure in place to do this already. And I would ask each of you, as you're working through this festival here today and over the course of the week, to think about that, to think about how we could do it in each of our countries, and collectively as a union, as how we can do that in real terms, that we actually, put positive pressure on our politicians in each of our country, but indeed in our Commission too, to be able to bring forward it does not have to be overly ambitious, it needs to be achievable. And to say, even if it is targeting, another 10% tenancies in each of our countries on top of housing for us first, if it's 100 tenancies per country, even something like that, to say that is what the European Union is doing collectively. And I think that we should and we must do that, because I think the platform that is in place there as part of EPOC, which is committed to promote prevention of homelessness, to access to permanent housing, provision of enabling support services to homelessness. So we have the objective. Each of our countries will do our piece, but wouldn't it be great as well if we were doing what we need to do for our own citizens, but work collectively for EU citizens as a collective? And it is my clear view that we should move towards that. The Lisbon Declaration, I think, underpins everything that we need to do between now and 2030. And I had the honour on behalf of the Irish people and the Irish government of signing the Lisbon Declaration, which commits us as a union to ending long-term homelessness by 2030. Now, as all of us know, we're in 2022 right now, and the clock is ticking. So we need to be clear in each of our governments, and indeed from the European Commission and the European Parliament, is what we're doing to be able to drive down homelessness and to actually reach and attain that goal by 2030. It will be a very challenging task, but I think it is morally one that we must attain. Housing and the housing crisis, in my view, is not just a housing issue. It's actually a societal issue. And for our younger people and not so young people who feel that they do not have a stake in their own countries because they cannot afford to rent or afford to buy, if the crisis continues to persist, a lot of people then move to the extremes. They move to the extremes because they don't see the centre working for them. And that can lead to people to other societal issues. And we have it well within our competence and within Europe and well within our expertise to be able to tackle this with our own government's plan on housing for all. I'm very confident that in Ireland we are making strides in that space to deliver more social homes than we've ever done before, more affordable homes than we've ever done before at scale, and yes, more private homes than we've ever done at scale. But most importantly, to create a stable and secure housing system right into the future. And I'll conclude on this remark, Bent, if I may. How do we look at things post trans-governmental, trans-elections, and I say this as a politician who's in government, each state and the European Union itself, in my view, needs to have a view of what housing should look like for our citizens in 2040, in 2050. So I got agreement from our government partners to establish a commission on housing, which is separate from my department, which is made up of Michelle, who's here, and many other experts, both national and international. Circa Edwards, who you'll know very well also, who I appointed to it. Stakeholders, people who build, lawyers, NGOs, to look at housing, what should it look like? And that will plot forward the plan for all future governments. Because one thing that does tend to be lost from election cycle to election cycle is a new government or indeed a new minister comes in and changes direction. You lose a year, you lose 2 years. We don't have that time to do it. So if all of us agree that we need to end homelessness, long-term homelessness by 2030, it should not matter who is in government, whether they're centre, left, centre, whatever position they're in. And if we can agree with our NGOs and with our experts in the sector, and indeed our politicians who aren't always expert, of how we get to that, I believe each state should be looking at that longer term view as to what their housing system should look like. And that's why the Commission on Housing, which is established just short of 6 months, is working very well independently of me. And the first piece of work the Commission is doing is to bring forward a referendum to our constitution, Bunrach na Héireann, to bring a question to the Irish people around the right to housing and what the right to housing means, and to enshrine that in our constitution. So once we do something like that, subject to the approval of the Irish people, it means every government into the future, whether I'm there or not, must move towards that constitutional objective. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you here this morning. I hope I haven't detained you too long. I want to thank Bent and the team in Housing Europe for inviting me here today. I want to wish all of you a very successful conference. I hope you enjoy it. I'd be very interested to hear the outputs of it. We have our own delegation here. Alan from my own department tomorrow will present on how we've started cost rental in Ireland. And I know we're all sharing ideas, we're all sharing experiences. And this to me is in a tangible way of really what's great about the European project, about the European Union, about all of us as European Union citizens working together for the betterment of our people. Gura míle maith agam go léir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Dara O'Brien. Thank you very much for being here with us. Thank you for your personal commitment to make homelessness a priority in Ireland through the Housing for All plan, but also for the example you inspire to other member states in the European Union. Thank you as well for your support to organizations like Housing Europe, FEANTSA, and the Housing Solutions Platform initiative. I would like to invite the panelists to come now, because we are going to speak about this element. You were saying there are two elements key to address homelessness. One is to increase the housing supply, and one is the support we bring to people. And we have asked the panelists, please come, the four panelists, to look more at this aspect on how do we develop this social care, this accompanying measure, and how do we make the link between housing and social care. So I'm really thankful for all of you for coming and agreeing to speak on this panel. I will first present you the four panelists. So we have Renaud Père, who's Vice, how would you say that in English? Vice President, thank you, of the Lyon Métropole, in charge of housing. Thank you very much for being here. Katharina, who works for the European Commission. You're actually Director for Social Rights and Inclusion in DG Ample. Thank you for being here with us. You are Kaila, Head of International Affairs for the Y Foundation. Thank you. And Rieke Lone, Chair of Social Affairs Committee for Housing Europe Working Group, and in charge of strategic development for BL, one of the main public housing associations in Denmark. So we will start with Katharina. Katharina, we heard the Minister speak of course, the European Platform on Combating Homelessness that was launched through the Lisbon Declaration last year. But before that, the European Pillar of Social Rights itself, in its Principle 19, clearly established this right to appropriate assistance and protection against forced eviction. Can Can you tell us a bit what do you think about how far we are now, 5 years after this European Pillar of Social Rights adoption, in enabling member states to deliver on this commitment? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is it on? Yeah, good. So thank you. First of all, let me really congratulate to Housing Europe and FEANTSA and Fondation Abbé Pierre for organizing this important festival. I also learned recently that festival is a new word for conferences, but okay, it sounds really cool, I have to say. But more important is really that you brought us all together and that we can reflect on what has been happening, what is in the pipeline, and what is really ongoing. I think it was great that the minister spoke just before our panel because he gave a super good insight in one member state in Irish perspective, which is really one, I would dare to say, of quite progressive policies when it comes to addressing shortages and addressing the issues such as affordable housing, social affordable housing, and the fight against homelessness, and actually where our common goal is really to eradicate homelessness by 2030. And when I say we, I mean all of us, because indeed 5 years after the pillar was proclaimed in Gothenburg, where European institutions and the member states agreed on the 20 principles, and a year after the action plan of the European pillar for social rights has been accepted in Porto, we have quite a number of deliverables relevant to housing and the pillar principle 19. I think the most important and the most relevant one is indeed the Lisbon Declaration and the establishment of the platform for combating homelessness. And the platform for combating homelessness is quite a novelty, I would say, in a Brussels corridors, if I can put it so bluntly, because it brings together the member states. So the 27 member states have signed a platform. It brings together the civil society and social partners, and 10 representatives of the civil society, the EU umbrella associations, have signed a platform, and also social partners. It brings the consultative committees of the EU, the Committee of Regions and Economic and Social Committee, and also European Parliament and the Commission together. So this quite innovative approach and quite a participatory approach has brought us to the point that practically less than a year after the adoption of, exactly a year after the adoption of the Lisbon Declaration, where we all signed to work towards eradicating homelessness by 2030. And also we all committed to several principles, like no one should sleep rough. We reflected on the role of those who are in danger of becoming evicted or who have been evicted. Also the housing-led solutions with housing first, I would say the most prominent housing-led solution is something that also we all have committed to work towards. We have adopted the work plan of the platform, which has several strands. The first strand is about finding the common understanding what the homelessness is, and in the light of, we don't necessarily need to have the same definition in all 27, but we need to know what we are speaking about and where we want to take it. The financing is extremely important. You have heard the minister several times. There are quite a number of opportunities, and somehow from the beginning of the work on the homelessness, we have been highlighting that EU funding solely will not do it at all, especially in majority of the member states where the funds for construction and for building are much lower than they used to be in the past. The European Regional Development Fund, due to the convergence and the various other elements. There are possibilities to invest within the InvestEU, where there will be special window for, it's called the social window for social affordable housing. But we see it as a push, as initial push towards really addressing housing shortages in the light of making sure that homeless do have a role or do have a part of the access to the social affordable housing. And also we have been working closely with EIB and CEB, Council of Europe Bank, in order to make sure that there are instruments either in the form of loans or in the guarantees or equities or some other possibilities. And the third very important strength is the mutual learning and learning from each other. And I think we are in a homeland of the best implementers. I wouldn't say in Europe, I would say worldwide, to be very frank, because we have been following a bit what is happening outside of Bubble 27. And what you in Finland have been doing with Housing First is really a role model that should be seen as something to replicate across the EU. I always say that we have to be realistic. It did not happen over the night. And it took, now it's already maybe 13 or 14 years from the first start. But what was visible then and what is visible even more today is that at certain momentum in time, you had a strong political will and political push that you want to work together towards eradicating homelessness. I'm pretty sure that 15 years ago, someone had a vision, and we know who had this vision. He's no longer working in Y Foundation, but I hope he's closely related to all of you, and someone who brought all the players, national authorities, local authorities, city, civil society, and those representing the homeless, because in the end they know the best what are they reflecting about. And we see this positive push being taking a will across the Europe. We see a really positive movements in France, and you will for sure reflect on it, and also that it took a bit of time to really get the boat in the right direction. And I believe with several other examples, like the Danish good example, like the Irish good example, like also those who have a different approach but are driving in the same direction, maybe they need a little bit more of push across, I would even dare to say, the Central and Eastern Europe, EU member states. But I believe we are really almost there. Next week we will have the first mutual learning event in the light of the platform, where we will discuss the Danish, Irish, and I think, I believe Finnish. Is it Finnish? Belgium, yes, Belgium, exactly. Belgium strategy and how they were built and how which positive aspects do they embrace, but also which challenges they face, because I think discussing on the challenges is something even more important than everything. So,
thank you very much, Katarina. Just one follow-up question, because you spoke of how we can name him, inspired the development of Housing First in Poland, and on the importance of the political leadership to bring actors together. Do you think the European Commission can play this role at European level of inspiring this move?
Well, we are doing our best, and we are trying our best to inspire all the stakeholders and all the players in the field. I think the future will show if we have done a good job or not that well, but I really believe we are on the right track. We have a super committed commissioner. I don't think ever a European Commission had such a committed commissioner on the cause of addressing the homelessness as really the most visible form of social exclusion in all its essence and its all occurrences. And it's also that he managed to somehow engage the whole Commission so that we look at the homelessness also from the perspective of equality, and the Commissioner Dalli, who has been particularly invested in some aspects of the homelessness, like persons with disabilities and the challenges that they face as a homeless population. And also we tried to open the homelessness platform. So those of you who have heard about platform, we have the structure of the platform is that we have a steering board who is practically leading and guiding the work of the platform, and then the whole platform, which is 27 plus committees plus the whole civil society and the social partners. And as a chair of the steering board, the commissioner has appointed Yves Leterme, who is a former Belgian prime minister, who was Minister of Labour and Social Policy, who is in a way chairing the whole work of the steering board and also leading the way forward. And I have to say our biggest push comes, and those who are at the same time, our biggest supporter is definitely the FEANTSA, because the whole idea about putting the homelessness so high on the agenda indeed came from the grassroots, came from those who are dealing with the homeless population and who know what is needed and who know how it has to be done. And then we brought together all the other stakeholders to be there and to be present. So we tried to really combine all the different actors and all those who have something to say, even if it is a small part of the solution, like addressing some specific issues like LGBTIQ homeless population and their challenges, because we have also ILGA Europe there in the picture. We have some other stakeholders who have a specific interest in addressing the challenge from their own point of view. But then in the end, if you want for this policy to succeed, you need to bring all the actors together. And our ultimate goal, so we have several goals. The main objective is really to work towards the eradication, but we have a midterm goal, which is that all the member states have, those who have the revised, those who do not have developed the national strategies for combating homelessness. And this is something that we are working from the last year, and we will be working to, let's say, mid-24, which would be like a midterm of the existence of the platform. And I hope that by that time we would be able to say that 27 have done the national strategies and that we help them in a way. So that's what I would consider as a success of the platform.
Thank you very much, Katarina. You spoke of the key role of the Y Foundation. So I'll turn to you now because you work for the Y Foundation, and so moving on as well from the political level to the concrete delivery of the service. Can you tell us a bit more about how it's working in Finland and how do you deal with the challenge of getting people into housing, and once they are in housing, how do they stay in housing? I'll put your slides on, sorry.
Yes. And thank you, Katarina. I will take your kind words to Mr. Juha Kaakinen, and he will know what you have to speak about him. But yes, my name is Juha Kaihela, and I come from the Y Foundation. We are the Finnish fourth largest landlord at the moment, about 18,500 apartments, which of about 7,000 is aimed for special groups, for example, homeless people or the people who are on the edge of becoming homeless. And what I want to talk about today is about something else beside housing first. I think that is the sidekick of my speech here. And because, of course, housing first is the thing that we are known in Finland, and what is the story behind our success regarding homelessness work. But I think in the past years, equally important thing is preventing homelessness. And what we have learned is that even though as much as housing first you have, if you don't prevent people ending up homelessness, then it doesn't matter. So I really like to talk about really grassroots level service. It's called housing advice services. And for example, we at the Y Foundation, we have our own housing advice service team. And they work with our tenants who might have some kind of problems with their, paying their rents, problems with the neighbors, dealing with the benefit system, etc. And how that works is that usually the tenants themselves, when they find their problem, they can call these services and ask, what can I do? I'm not able to pay my rent this month. What is the situation regarding my rental agreement? Well, then the housing advisors, they come on board. They see the situation together with the tenant. They set up a meeting, either in the home of the tenant or at the office or somewhere else. They go look through the finances and see if there is some kind of benefits they didn't know they are agreed to have, or if there is some kind of other solutions they might be able to get. And usually what happens after that is they make some kind of payment plan. So within the next 6 months, you're going to pay the amount of rent that you have missed during these 6 months. And what I think is important to understand is that when we talk about housing first in Finland, we also include these housing advice services within the housing first. So we think you can't have housing first without housing advice services and vice versa. And so I think that is also really, really important thing to understand. Backwards, why not? And like I mentioned, the services, they are really, really easy to access. So basically the housing advice services, they can give you a call that, hey, you have missed your rent payment. Is there something that we can help you to deal with it? So they can pay home visit, like I said, meet in the office, phone calls, emails, WhatsApp messages, Instagram, Twitter, social media, all combined. Today, it's all possible, online, but most of the people, they tend to prefer the meetings face-to-face, like we all now when we are back from the COVID time. But I think what matters the most is that it has been the NGO landlords that has been doing the housing advice services for many years now. But as we have get the results, like you can see from the screen, evictions prevented only in the city of Helsinki during the past couple of years, the amount of prevented evictions is significant. And when the private landlords have figured out that, hey, this is actually also a way to save money, because of course one eviction costs anything between 2,000 to 5,000 euros. So when you combine that amount of prevented evictions to that sum of money, you do the math. But then the private landlords got interested as well. And now what it's cool to see is that the private landlords, they are doing cooperation with the NGO housing advice services, but they have also hired themselves housing advice services, so that even less people from their own apartments would end up homeless altogether. So I think when we talk about even housing first or preventing homelessness, it's also important to talk about the finances. What are the savings that are possible to be made? Because we all know it's a human right that everyone has their home of their own. But when we talk about the politicians and the decision makers, then it comes to the finances. And when we can show these results to them, I think it's a win-win situation. But that's all for now from me.
Thank you, Juha. One follow-up question. What do you see as the main challenge of housing advisor in Finland, and how can public authorities support them?
Well, I think at the moment, after the COVID, I think the challenges is that more people need more help. And accessing to services is quite difficult because many of the services were closed and the lines are huge. So for example, if together with the tenant, the housing advisor needs to go to have, placed in a rehabilitation or something like that, the waiting times are too long. So I think that needs to change so that people have easy access to the services that they need beside the advice.
Thank you. I'll turn to Rikke. So you also represent a housing provider, one of the main one in Denmark. And we invited you to tell us more about what is the Danish situation. How do you ensure in your organization that people can stay in housing despite life crisis, unemployment, family breakdown, illness? And then the new Danish strategy on homelessness was adopted last week. So can you tell us more about it? And I'll put your slides.
Maybe I'll do it without slides.
Thanks.
I think. Yeah. Well, thank you, and thank you for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here. It's it's right. I represent BL, the Danish Association of Housing Organizations in Denmark, and we take care of the interests of all of our approximately 500 members at a political level, both, of course, technically, financially, and socially. And we in Denmark have like a universal model of housing, which means that everyone can be appointed an apartment in one of our housing estates, but every fourth of our housing units are disposable for the municipality if you have some person who needs in desperate need of housing. So we have this universal model. We have around 1 million tenants, so we are quite a big housing provider in Denmark. Every sixth Dane lives in one of our housing units. And we offer non-profit affordable housing, so not specifically social housing, as you can hear with our universal model. But it's correct, we have a new strategy on homelessness, and I think I can recognize what you talked about, Katarina, the push. I find that we actually have the political will right now overall to change, to make a change and actually eradicate homelessness in Denmark. And I like to believe that we in the housing sector actually had a role to play in this as well, since I think since 2019 and even before, I think we've been really vocal and outspoken about how we cannot have a welfare society where we have homelessness. It's just not okay. And as housing providers, I think it's meant a lot at a political level that we are so vocal about it. It also means that we have a big responsibility, of course, in delivering ourselves. We have to deliver enough affordable homes for people with low incomes. And that's what fell in place last week. The Danish Parliament just passed a new law that makes it possible for us to provide even more affordable, cheap housing for those who have really low incomes and different social challenges. So that's a really big step on the way. And I had some slides about housing first strategies, and I think you know all about it, so I don't have to present it here. But of course, housing is the basis, and I think we have come a long way in providing the basis, the basic. But what I really want to touch upon today is the social support. And you asked me, how do we actually secure that? Of course, that we have enough housing, but how do we secure that people stay in our housing and thrive and live good lives? And there I must say, we've come a long way. The roads have been paved for realizing a housing first strategy in Denmark, but I also have some focus points or some different points of attention. Let me say it that way. And first of all, I'm really not worried, but I think that we will see some challenges when it comes to the transition from living in, for instance, a homeless shelter or previously, how do you say in English, children who have been placed in foster care, and you know all these transitions in life where you have to all of a sudden be placed in your own home. We have some focus on this because how do we secure that the municipalities and other organizations deliver the social support that is needed? So there is no bad will, but in the housing sector we're really focusing on this so that we don't find that the bridge is not working. Also, of course, the challenges with mental illness and different kinds of substance abuse. How do we secure the support that is needed? Also, it all points, or a lot of it points to the municipalities where we are really trying to do like strategically to do agreements with the municipalities to secure that for every person who is placed in a private home, there is a social support system like connected to every single person, not in general terms. So that are some of the points of attention for us. And then I just want to talk about the prevention, because that's also a big part of our focus in the housing sector in Denmark, the non-profit affordable housing sector. We have a social obligation, and we take it very seriously. We have extensive community-based social work. We have 1 million tenants, and I think our social work reaches up to 200,000 of our tenants directly, where we have professional on-the-ground projects and initiatives to help people get jobs, get into education and different kind of things. We also have extensive financial counseling, as you were talking about, to make sure that people do not get evicted. You can show up and have a conversation with a professional advisor who can give you advice on how to do a budget and what to do if things are just too difficult to understand and so on. So that's really a big part of our local work, and I think can be really important when we talk about prevention as well. And then we talk about new things. Social investments are some of we are really focused on right now. How do we flip the narrative about some of our housing areas, some of our tenants to be not problems, but there is a lot of potential and social investments if you flip the narrative. That's also something we're really focusing on. And last but not least, to create the sustainable chains of value, like who delivers what at what point, like across sectors. What do the housing provider provide? What does the civil society provide? What is the role of the municipality, so that everyone locally, knows who to call, what to do at all times. And I think those are some of the real attention points when we go from a policy level to making it work at a very local, practical level. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And just one question, because the next panelist will be a representative from a municipality. What support do you need? Sorry. What support do you need from local authorities, let's say, in enabling you to provide a prevention mechanism?
Well, we need to have what you call agreements that are very clear, so that you do not. We provide the housing, so we secure that at the point where we have a person living in one of our estates or housing units, how do we secure that the municipality is still there, very close, when problems rise, or to have the continuancy in the focus on this person? I'm talking about single persons here, not groups, but what do we do for that one person, so that the municipality has a focus on that also after the person has been given a home. I don't see any bad will, but I see a lot of work, a lot of different obligations from the municipality side, and this should be as important as anything else. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So I turn now toward Renaud. So you represent the Lyon Métropole area, and we would like to hear from you what do you see as a role and responsibility of public authorities, local authorities, in enabling housing providers to prevent people from falling into homelessness, and what is your role in addressing homelessness?
Okay, so thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here, and thank you to FEANTSA and to Housing Europe and Fondation Abbé Pierre to have organized this panel. And of course, a special thought to all the staff of this festival. We know in Lyon the works it needs to organize such a festival, and I have a special thought to Cédric Van Sivandel, my friend and former president of Housing Europe. And just a quick answer to one of your questions. Yes, I'm convinced that European Commission could play and should play a leading role in the fight against homelessness and the support to Housing First program. And I was really impressed and touched by the words of the minister at the beginning of our panel. So one of the main tools to fight homelessness is Housing First program. Maybe just a few words, and then I will tell you what we are doing in Lyon. This program in France was implemented by the national state. So there is a strong relationship between the national state and a local authority like Métropole de Lyon. And we are belonging to the 10, I think, French local authorities who are implementing, the Housing First program. If I give a summary of what is our approach, I will tell that, of course, the first need is a mobilization by the local authorities, of an affordable housing supply. So that's a very, very difficult issue in territories like Greater Lyon. It's a very attractive territory, and so we have a real housing shortage. So it's quite difficult, but we have to find a new housing supply. Maybe we have to work more with the European Commission with private landlords. We are still very focused on social housing landlords. So we have to work with private landlords and to mobilize them. The second pillar of our program is a support to NGOs and for the development of new support services. And so it's one of the pillars of Housing First, so it's not very original. And we are quite involved in Lyon in the changing of practices. That's the third pillar. And of course, we are convinced, as you are, that Housing First is not a simple tool or public policy, an average public policy. No, it is a paradigm. So we have to work in this sense. So we need to change practices and to assess them with a real evaluation of the program. So we are working with universities, and it's quite important. But I just want to add a word. I think we are, in France, at the very beginning of Housing First. And we need, of course, first to have more private landlords, to have the mobilization of private landlords. So we have to find new tools to involve them. And we are thinking about new tools in Lyon. Maybe we can have a word about this. It's not possible, and maybe it's quite, a difference between the situation or the experience of Helsinki and Lyon, where the number of homeless is huge, is more important. We can't forget the role of not shelters. I will not say shelter, but we are, for example, let me tell you just a word about one of our experience. We settled on metropolitan lands some tiny houses, but we don't have to oppose this experience to Housing First. Why? If we work on the way to live, if we give the principle of housing first in these tiny houses and with the role of NGOs and a lot of things, it could be the first step to housing first. So we are working in this way. And at least, and I will repeat, we really need the support of European Commission. In fact, we have to be convinced here that homelessness in cities is a European issue. That needs a special program. Of course, we have to mobilize the European banks, but we need a special program from European Commission. But it needs a direct dialogue between European Commission and cities. And that's maybe one of the challenges of our relationship, and that's what we try to talk about. We talked about. That's what we try to create since the beginning of this year. We organized during the French presidency of the European Council in Lyon a big event, the 1st of March, about this subject. So we have to work, and of course, a place like that, this festival, this panel, the role of European cities networks like FEANTSA, but also Eurocities, the role of leading cities in this subject of housing first, like Helsinki, is very important, because we have a few months. The minister was very precise on this point. And we have to act very quickly now.
Yeah, on that, I wanted to ask you, with the cost of living crisis we are heading to, how do you feel? Do you feel your city is ready to shoulder that? And how can you prevent this cost of living crisis to turn into a homelessness crisis?
I'm not sure my city is ready, but we don't have time. So we have to be ready. And we have to act in several ways. Of course, we are experiencing in Lyon a real housing market tension. Prices, when I say prices, rent prices, but also buying prices are growing and growing. So it's a big issue in Lyon. And of course, it is our agenda. We were elected in July 2020. So we are working on this subject since 2020. What have we done? Just a few words. First, we have controlled rents in Lyon and Villeurbanne, so the core of the métropole de Lyon. And it was an opportunity given by the law in France. It is a possibility to experiment this control. It was necessary. For example, for the small flats, that means 100 euros decrease, 100 euros a month decrease. So it's quite significant. Second, we want to produce more social housing units. And the situation in Lyon is very dramatic. When you have 10 people waiting for social housing, only one can have a social housing. So it's awful. So there is a housing shortage, and especially a social housing shortage. So we want to build around 5,000 social housing units a year at the end of the term. So, and how can we do that? Thanks to the urban planning tools, for example, we created social mixity sectors. It is a kind of zoning, and in some areas, real estate developers have to produce 35% of social housing. And also we are directly helping our metropolitan social housing companies. And third, just this last word, third, we are working on a kind of third way of housing between private housing and social housing. What does it mean? For example, collaborative housing, and we are planning around 5 projects a year in some new areas, new neighborhoods of Lyon and of the metropole, but also in existing building we can build metropole. And the second example of this third way is what we called bail réel solidaire. Sorry for the French. That consists in the separation between the value of land and the value of property. It's quite well known in some European countries, but it was not used in France. And this affordable property is dedicated to people who can have social housing. And we want to build around 1,000 a year at the end of the term.
That sounds great. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm now opening the floor for questions. If there are some questions in the room. Yes. Someone is.
Hi, my name is Sergej Kara. I'm the Director of Social Affairs Department of City of Bratislava, Slovakia. And I have a question for Mrs. Knežević. If there is a plan of European Commission to challenge or ask countries which signed the Lisbon Declaration how they are doing on the plan to 2030, and if there is a plan of challenging the countries, what is the plan? Thank you.
Just if there are other questions, please raise your hand now, because then we will go straight to the conclusion. Yes, we'll take a few questions then.
Hi, John Cottrell from Clued Housing in Ireland. Just going back to the point you were making around the supports, the wraparound supports for tenants who are at risk of homelessness. Do you have any suggestions or solutions in how we can improve the engagement from tenants who don't want to engage with the services in the first place? How do you build up that trust? Thank you.
And I'm checking. Okay, a last question from Alice.
Thank you very much. One question. So, in your experience, did you have to come up, or are you planning on coming up with innovative solutions from the point of view of financing of this kind of activities? So housing with wraparound support, that would be my question. Especially if including EU funding, but in general.
That's a question to Renaud?
To all.
To all, okay. Katarina, please.
So thank you very much. I'll reply to our Slovak colleague question, and then on financing a bit. Yes, in each meeting of the platform, and we had 2 so far, we asked member states what have they done and what are the plans. I have to say some member states are still quite shy and still have to first of all decide how to deal with the homeless population and which direction to take. I don't know who was in the meeting, in the ministerial meeting in Paris and then the next day in Lyon, because it was quite visible the diversity of EU member states. Some member states said we will build in each county a homeless shelter. And then you can imagine just the whole civil society, you know, going completely mad and reflecting like this is not the way we want to take this topic forward. but this shows the European reality, and that's why I said there are such huge differences between the EU member states. So what we want to do is really, and as I said previously, we want to lead the member states, and we really see our roles as facilitating, bringing the people and the experience together, and really working towards this integrated approach. And as you rightly pointed out, there are other options. Myself, I've seen the tiny houses. It's super moving, it's super inspirational, and really an emotional even visit, I would say. Not only for myself, the commissioner was there, and Mr. Leterme and the other colleagues. And the fact is that is really temporary, and you take it as a temporary solution. And everybody who enters there know that this is a temporary momentum, and they will move forward. And this is also something that we signed in the Lisbon Declaration, that no one should stay in a temporary accommodation longer than needed to find a permanent solution. And this is the main principle. Within this mutual learning exchange that is starting next week, we will have a number of seminars, workshops, events of any kind, however we call it, but that will really guide the member states towards understanding what the housing-led solutions are, what the housing first approach is, and really trying to guide them towards implementing that in their national policies. And then when I say this really ambitious agenda, because 2024 is just around the corner, if we really want the member states to say, yes, we do have a national strategies, they don't have to be called, it could be guidance, action plan, whatever part of the broader picture, a separate strategy, however any member states decide, but the principle needs to be put in place. And then we will also we already identified those member states who need a bit of more and additional support. And we do plan also to target some specific actions within those member states, and also bringing them in front and as the front runners. We work very closely with the presidencies, I have to say. So the whole platform was launched under the Portuguese presidency, and I guess the Social Europe was really glad that Portuguese presidency took a place when it took a place, because they brought so many questions rightly on the surface and put them so prominently in the EU context. We continue with the Slovenian, where we established the platform. We adopted the work program under the French presidency, and now we are working closely with the Czech presidency to have the next rounds of the mutual learning, which would then bring a bit more perspective, let's say, of the Central Eastern Europe and the challenges that they are facing in this respect. And in order, no one likes to be taught what to do. That's why we think that exchanging what works is the best way forward. It's the best way how to assess and embrace the approach. And also on the financing, I would like to say that we hear more and more calls for this special fund program, however one wants to call it. And in the terms of being a policymaker, I would say that all of those who want to be talkative should be talkative, because even though we are just starting to implement the present financial perspective, which is 21-27, the next one will come really as soon as possible. And if something was to be done in this respect, has to be done like now. Of course, we have to factor in the momentum of crisis, because you remember when the COVID started, and then we were always reflecting that we have to think about future crises, but I believe no one had a war as a future crisis that we will have to factor in our policies, and all the consequences that the war has brought and will bring in the future. but we cannot disregard the social rights and the social policy in this respect, and we have to work towards that goal. So this is a long-term vision, but the short-term vision is Commission is planning to launch next year an easy social innovation call, which will be of quite a high financial amount. Of course, I'm not supposed to say it exactly what would be the amount, because the financial decisions first needs to be adopted. But this will be a first good opportunity for all of you who would like to take your projects and ideas further to implement, because social innovations are about piloting, succeeding or even failing, but then understanding why something has or has not worked. And this will be a really good option for all of you to take an active role and pilot for a year, 2, 3. Let's see what would be the time span. And also with this funding, we would like maybe to open possibility for some further investments, like if some, let's say, local authorities or some member states would like to use this funding for preparing the project documentation for using the InvestEU, or for taking a loan from the CEB, this would be possible, and this would be something that we would encourage. So this is a little push that might really grow in, as the minister said, a big and solid tree, and with many branches and many happy people around it.
Thank you very much. So the question maybe to you, Enrique, on the wraparound services and how to improve them. It's a big question. We don't have much time, but some keys maybe.
Yep. Yeah. So how do those people who doesn't connect with the services, how to get them to connect? Consistency, never give up, time. If that doesn't work, then you need to think about your systems, because I think the services, they're competing with the other things that are available on the streets. So you need to think about the services, that how can we move them forward so that people feel more comfortable to access them. Because I think many times I hear the question, what about those people who want to be homeless? I don't think anybody wants to be homeless. It's our job to make sure that the services are there for the people in a way that they feel comfortable to access them.
Do you want to add?
I'll just add a small thing. I agree with all the, there's no recipe, but time, patience, and working at a very local level, being right next to the person in need of the help. I have 2 very short examples. In the second biggest city in Aarhus, there has been an agreement where they have a lot of young homeless people that do not have a lot of other problems than being homeless. And when you are being considered giving a home in Aarhus, you need to accept that there will be a social worker being in contact with you. So that's part of and I think there will be pros and cons, but I think for the right person, this could be crucial. And we also have another example from the long-term homeless people living in tiny houses, or what we call in Denmark crooked housing, that is fitted to this specific group. And we have a concept of, maybe you have it in other countries, like a social janitor, who's just there all the time, playing guitar, making a bonfire, but can also help with all the practical things that are needed. So someone who is there all the time. Yeah.
Thank you. And Renaud, do you want to respond to some of the questions, maybe on financing?
Yes, on financing. In fact, one of our issue and solution is vacancy of flats, and for example, of course, private properties and public properties too. And we are thinking about the establishment, the creation of a new collaborative housing company with many stakeholders, such as NGOs and, of course, Métropole de Lyon, to mobilize private landlords, but also our own public buildings for Housing First program.
Thank you very much. Please help me to thank the speakers for their contribution today. Thank you very much. And I would like to invite Sorka Edouard, the Secretary General of Housing Europe, to conclude the meeting.
It's not Sorka, it's me.
Okay, so change of plan. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you very much to all of you. Yes, I have the privilege to conclude the meeting. I'll take a lot of notes here. I think it's, and forgive me if I'm not, I will not just take one of the things you said on repeat. You said a lot of very good things, but when we have the minister at the beginning and what he said, it was that he had to put a long-term perspective. I think it was very interesting that he put down a committee and said, if we have to combat homelessness, you have to have a long-run view on it and take it away from the daily things going on in the political life. I think it's a very important thing. And you, Katarina, said that what was going on in Lisbon when we signed the declaration was much more than just signing another declaration, because you make a link between many institutions and many parts there, and have a more robust thing. And if you are a civil servant and very polite, but what you were saying actually, forgive my translation, but we are looking over your shoulder. You have to, when you sign the declaration, you have to make some actions, and if you're not making some action, we try to have a gentle or maybe a less gentle push on you. Of course, we have to give you the right incentives. You have to do it for yourself, or at least think you have the right ideas yourself. But it's actually a thing where the Commission will be very active. And if we go back to what Derek said, it was exactly what he said in the beginning of this meeting, that the work of the Commission, that the push for the Commission and the focus from the Commission is very important here. So I'm so happy that you said that. Also, when we look around at the different things going on in different countries, I think what the Y Foundation, the experience from the Y Foundation, what you said, patience, and we do it again, and we do it again, and we do it again, and if the things doesn't work, then we look at our system and say, is there a failure with our system? Do we have to provide some other measures here? Could be social measures or maybe some new types of housing. And what Rikke said, that some of the housing we provide in the Danish context is what we call, the translation is very difficult, skew housing or something. It's a really housing between the streets and ordinary housing for some people, where you have to have just a step between that, and when you are on this step, we can bring you further on into the ordinary housing system and get in touch with the, maybe in a very good case, the labor market, or at least to have a good and a decent life, if that's what we can achieve. And we should achieve that, because in a welfare state or in all states, we can't have homelessness. End of it. That's it. So we have to eradicate homelessness. And we have to eradicate homelessness before 2030. So we are in a hurry. And that's why I think one of the things many of us can take home to our own countries is what is done in Ireland, to have this kind of a committee focusing on it on a long-term basis, and not have this stop-and-go policy when you have shifting ministers, shifting governments in this field. You said many good things today. So. And one of the things some of you said and also our moderator said, what about the cost of living crisis? What about the tensions? What about things going maybe the wrong way? It's very hard now to construct new housing, and we have to do it, as you also said in the Lyon case. But what I felt here was a great optimism. So we will achieve this goal. We have to eradicate homelessness, and we are in Finland, so we can see it can happen if we are committed, all of us. So shouldn't we say that we are committed, all of us, and we eradicate homelessness, and at least before 2030, but hopefully earlier. Is that it? Yes. Thank you for moderating today, and thank you to all of you participating in this event.